Hi there, I'm Monique Gloria of Dragonfly Soul Healing, and while I'm a hypnotherapist on a mission to help people with stress, today I'm coming to you as a mom of a daughter with histamine intolerance, among a few other things. And while I'm not a doctor or someone who has it all figured out and is on the other side, I might be just a little bit further down the path than some others. And so I feel really compelled to share what I've learned so that others don't have to learn the hard way like I did. So if you're here because you believe you might have histamine intolerance or someone you love might, I hope you find this video helpful. So, what is histamine intolerance? Well, when looking to understand histamine intolerance, you must first break it down to say, what is histamine? Histamine is a chemical responsible for a few major functions that include communicating messages to your brain. It triggers release of stomach acid to help with digestion. It's released after an injury or allergic reaction as part of your histamine intolerance is not a sensitivity to histamine, but an indication that you develop too much of it. When histamine levels get too high or when it can't be broken down properly, it can affect your normal bodily functions. And this is usually where it catches people's attention. Intolerance generally means that one is much more sensitive to histamine than the average person, and there could be a couple of reasons for this. Each of us has a bucket of how much histamine we can process. The size of our bucket depends on our genetics and our epigenetics. Input to the bucket is food and other things in our environment that trigger the release of histamine in the body. You naturally produce histamine along with the enzyme diamine oxidase, or DAO. DAO is responsible for breaking down histamine that you get from foods. If you develop a DAO deficiency and are unable to break down histamine foods, you could develop an intolerance. Some reasons your DAO levels might be affected could be things like medications that block the normal function or prevent production of DAO altogether, gastrointestinal disorders such as leaky gut syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, among many others, histamine-rich foods that cause DAO enzymes to function improperly, or foods that block the enzyme altogether. One other thing is bacterial overgrowth could be another contributing factor to developing a histamine intolerance. Bacteria grows when food isn't properly digested, causing histamine overproduction. Normal levels of DAO enzymes can't break down the increased levels of histamine in your body, causing a reaction. You can initially help shift to neutral by controlling the symptoms through a low histamine diet. If a low histamine diet doesn't produce quick signs of relief or a significant decrease of symptoms in a few weeks, then it's unlikely you have histamine intolerance. However, with my daughter, we noticed a major difference after just a few days, stopping the repeating cycle of flares that was happening every few days. There are a ton of different lists of high histamine foods on various websites that you should avoid. It is very overwhelming and confusing because the list vary. And the reason for that is histamine levels vary in so many different ways. It could be how things are packaged, produced, the age of the food, the brand. Let me give you an example. Chickpeas are often listed on many sites as foods to avoid. However, I found that by soaking them overnight, making them in the morning, and freezing immediately after, my daughter was able to tolerate them. I could do a whole video about foods, how we produce them, to make life easier, and the whole workflow I've created just to not lose my mind in having histamine intolerance and a toddler at the same time. If you're interested in a video like that, please let me know in the comments below. At first, I believed that histamine intolerance was the answer. After all, I had heard of lactose intolerance and I knew there was a pill for that, and if people wanted to eat dairy, they could just take the medicine and everything would be fine. I thought the condition just needed to be controlled through diet and medication. And so I joined a histamine intolerance support group just to learn more and make sure that I was informed. I started hearing about a condition called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome in the online support groups. And ironically, my daughter's holistic doc brought it up and confirmed it just a few weeks later. Histamine intolerance is actually a symptom of mast cell activation syndrome in some people. The hard part is that not many doctors even know about this because it's something that appeared in recent times. The condition was hypothesized by the pharmacologist John Oates and Jack Roberts of Vanderbilt University in 1991. And following a buildup of evidence, Featured in papers by a variety of doctors in peer-reviewed journals, it was finally named in 2007. Diagnostic criteria was proposed in 2010, but to be honest, they're still discussing that nearly 12 years later. Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, also known as MCAS or MCAS, is one type of mast cell activation disorder, and it is an immunological condition in which mast cells inappropriately and excessively release chemical mediators, such as histamine, resulting in a range of chronic symptoms, sometimes including anaphylaxis or near anaphylaxis attacks. Primary symptoms include cardiovascular, dermatological, gastrointestinal, neurological, and respiratory problems, and it presents differently in every single person, which makes it even harder to identify in the first place. Okay, I know I just dropped a lot of medical jargon on you, but let me break this down for you as simply as I understand it. Again, let me remind you that I am not a doctor. I am just a mom who's on a mission to figure this out and help my daughter heal. Mast cells are a type of white blood cell. Together, our white blood cells play a very important role in our immune system, helping us fight off infection and other invaders. Mast cells are packed with histamine, a chemical released when you have an allergic reaction or an infection. They also contain hairpin, a chemical which stops the blood from clotting. Mast cells are hard-working cells that have many different functions, including helping to fight off infection and healing wounds. So imagine for a moment you have a bacterial infection and your body deploys white blood cells to help resolve that infection. In doing so, your body is producing significantly more histamine than it normally would. You're unaware this is happening inside of you, and so you go to town eating all kinds of delicious foods like strawberry and banana smoothies, avocado toast, and Alfredo pasta leftovers from 2 nights before when you went out to dinner. All of a sudden, you find yourself on the toilet with a number of other alarming symptoms. Maybe your heart is racing, you have a crazy headache, and you just feel horrible altogether. You immediately jump in your mind to food poisoning because that's where our minds always go. It must be that restaurant doing something shady in the kitchen. In reality, all of those things you just consumed are high histamine foods, and your body might not have enough DAO or ability to process it fast enough due to the amount of histamine that you've consumed combined with what you have just created on your own while fighting the infection. This is where things get tricky because there are a number of different root causes that would essentially be classified as a mast cell destabilizing event. I use bacteria as an example, but there are many more. I'll be diving into them on an upcoming video because it's a big discussion to have. The number one thing that I found to be helpful in navigating healing histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome would be stress resilience. Becoming resilient to stress using self-hypnosis has changed my life, and it has allowed me to confidently, calmly work through finding and addressing the root cause. And that is why I created the Stress Resilience Masterclass to help others do the same. If you're curious and want to learn more, check out this video or go to dragonflysoulacademy.com to learn more. If you feel so called, I hope you take the leap and join us in this inaugural class. Third time's a charm. That was a lot of medical jargon, I know.